Hey everyone, and welcome to SBI's Reigniting Small Business podcast. I'm Laura Richards here today with Patrick Lee, CEO of Spark Business Institute. Hi, Patrick.
Hello.
So, Patrick, today we're going to be discussing how the pandemic is really creating a proverbial forest fire on Main Street. And this could be furtive ground. It could be providing some furtive soil for new business growth. And we're going to look at it kind of from both of those angles. So why don't you kind of talk about from a holistic, perspective, since March, April timeframe, what's going on and what are we seeing then versus what we're seeing now?
Yep. So I think in March and April, when the pandemic hit and we had all of our lockdown and stay home and all that those rules, we saw folks quickly do it. Right. This was an unknown. It was scary. We're going to follow the rules. We're going to try to mitigate the health risks. And I think there was a lot of businesses that were going to sort of hang on because this was supposed to be short. Remember, we were hearing from leadership in the country that no worries, just 6-8 weeks, we'll get back to business as usual. I think that the not getting back to business as usual had massive impact in some of the areas that we've talked about a lot. The restaurant industry, brick and mortar, Main Street retail, leisure businesses, event businesses, those type of things. But there was an uptick, right? I mean, we did get through 2 or 3 months of this, and then certain businesses sort of righted themselves, and then we started to see a reopening of the economy. And certain parts of the economy absolutely boomed when we came back, but for the most part, this was sort of a lull in the storm, I guess. And there was always that fear that we were going to hit in winter, the pandemic come roaring back. Would we have to lock down again? What would this look like? And I think we're in that space where we're teetering a little bit, right? Where there is fear of this being a complete disaster, but it doesn't yet have to be, right? Are we going to lock down completely? Will there be another stimulus package? What does all that look like? So I love this forest fire analogy because, is this a controlled burn, or is this are we just flaming along here and we have no idea what's going to happen? But I mean, that analogy always, you do a controlled burn because once you do that, new stuff starts to come up. And I think we've seen some really interesting numbers around startups. I mean, we are in a little bit of a spike around startup small businesses right now.
That's definitely true. I think one of the things that we've been talking about with this controlled burn theory is that it really seems to be one area, one neighborhood, we'll call it, that is being impacted in a way that we might not have followed all the way through without some insights. And that's baby boomers. So people who are towards the retirement end of their career, who are entrepreneurs, small business owners, are in a different position than people in any other point of their life because they might be nearing retirement and at a point where they're either going to pass on some wealth to their family or they're going to be in a position not to be able to do that. And because right now they are the largest segment, owning about 50% of small businesses in the United States, they're being affected disproportionately. So I think one of the things that we're also looking at is this impact to the middle class. So I don't know if maybe you want to talk about that a little bit, because obviously we're seeing, Wall Street's rebounding, and there's certainly corporate profits across lots of different sectors are up, and we're not seeing those same benefits to this middle class population that we're talking about of business owners.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot of impact here, right? Because we've talked about this previously about how Main Street does most of the new jobs, most of the good paying jobs, and we're seeing that this is one of those transfer of wealth recessions where the rich are getting richer. Okay, Wall Street, the stock market is doing fine. These large companies, especially high tech e-commerce companies, are doing quite well. This has really been affecting those brick and mortar, small business, Main Street establishments. And we've talked in previous podcasts about the transfer of wealth in those businesses is really interesting. A lot of folks think you sell a business. Main Street businesses, there's some that sell, but generally it's not a sale. There's either a shutdown or a pass on. And that pass on is a passing of a viable piece of a viable business. So there's wealth in that to either, the next generation, right? So it's either a family member or it's a longtime employee or somebody who's been in the business, who's younger than the original owner and is going to take over. So that transfer of wealth happens that way. And I think we're seeing some pretty big hits to that. We're seeing a lot of these businesses that survived laid off a lot of people. So the business's value is significantly down at that point. And who they're passing that off to changes. And sometimes they're not even passing anything off. Sometimes there's just a shutdown with the idea there's going to be a reopen. And what that looks like and what value that business has at this moment is completely undetermined, and probably potentially not good. So, that transfer of wealth is there, plus the retirement piece, right? I mean, so how many more years was the baby boomer going to keep that business and put money away? How much money did they use from their savings and retirement to try to keep the business alive when we thought this was going to be short term, right? With all of the stimulus money and everything that's having to happen, the amount of borrowing internationally right now, the debt that's out there, how is that going to impact things like Social Security and Medicare and so on? These are all unknowns. So this would be one of those panic moments. If you were thinking you're retiring now or in the next couple of years, you may not have that option.
Or it's time to get together your plan.
Well, you should have had a plan, but it's time to adjust that plan, right?
Exactly.
This is not what you thought it was going to be happening.
No, it's not. So let's talk about, let's give it a face. I'm going to tell you about an example that I read about. This is from CNBC Online. And they interviewed this woman. Her name is Kellyarneys, and she's the owner of Pacific Fine Food Catering in Alameda, California. So in 2004, she bought a company. It was a catering business. They had a loyal, dependable staff, and she really built it up. And she's 58 years old. She wasn't planning to retire anytime soon. Her husband is 66, but she thought that she could install capable management and enjoy the recently purchased Little Italy vacation house that they have. And unfortunately, enter the pandemic. All of a sudden, they had to lay off their staff, and she's in there 360 days a year. And now she's like, well, I think I want to sell my business, but it's maybe lost, 85% of her revenues. So she's doing kind of what you talked about, Patrick, where she's then found an employee who she can sell to at a much reduced price, just so that they can get out from under it and not feel like they have this basically risk and thing chained to them. So it's basically exactly what you just said. Her example is one of many, many that we could talk about.
Well, and that's, it's interesting because when a recession happens, there are always folks who come out well at the back end of the recession, right? And the reason they do is they're either buying up compromised assets, right? So in a recession, that's not as valuable as it was. So your ability to purchase it at much lower pricing goes up. Right. So those who are accumulating distressed assets, it's a good time for that in a recession. Right. I mean, it's a great time for that right now. So buying a business right now may make some sense. Right. It's interesting, though, that, that works well for the buyer. But as we talked about, it's putting the folks who had plans around the value of their business on notice. I like that example you gave because the employees, I don't think it was just one employee. I think it was the employees got together to buy that business. That's an interesting transfer, and that shows you that there was a legacy in that business, right? That was a real Main Street business that, okay, look, we don't want this to go away. This is our livelihood. All of us employees are going to come together, and you want to get out from under this pressure on you, and maybe someday you'll get to visit that villa in Italy again.
Yeah.
Let's do this. That's very interesting, that buying piece, but I suspect that's not the most common happening here. I suspect what's happening is businesses are shutting down, and into the gap is startups. I think that it's less likely for people to jump in and purchase a distressed business as it is to see, oh, that business is gone. I've always wanted to do something similar to that. Maybe I'll fill that gap.
Yeah. So just to let everybody know, to put a number on it, the wealth transfer that we're talking about is about $68 trillion. So
not insignificant.
Yeah. When we talk about this being all around small to mid-sized family businesses, and that's what's at stake, you can see how the economic impact that it would have, if a significant portion of it was wiped out, and what it would do to those generations. And
well, let's put some more parameters on. I know you've got a few other statistics around this baby boomer middle class wealth piece. What does it look like?
Well, according to the Center for New Middle Class, only 20% of non-prime boomers said they had retirement accounts. And that's down from 36% a year ago. So that's just one statistic showing, their savings are drying up. Well, even wealthier boomers saw their savings drop, with 38% with a prime credit rating saying that they had retirement accounts, down from 45 a year before. So as the crisis drags on, some of these businesses are going to be forced to make tough decisions. And depending on the industry, boomers who might not have considered selling before, they could hold on and, hopefully bring those businesses back. Maybe they feel like they can't do that within the time frame of their retirement, and that's why they're getting out, or they're pivoting, or they're changing their model.
But there's also that whole idea of, you don't panic. Like, if you talk to anybody who's advisor around retirement and stocks and all of that, they'll tell you the worst time to get out of the market is when it's dropping, right? Just wait it out. So, every time we have a recession, we see folks trying to get out ahead of the drop and basically guaranteeing a loss. The market tends to show that it always comes back. So why not wait it out? So unless you're somebody who was for some reason already having to retire, right? That there was something set in stone, you're going to delay a retirement if you're in a situation like that. Well, I wonder about that with the businesses too. As opposed to saying, okay, we just got to get out. Do you try to ride this out and try to get into next year after the vaccines hit, build back up your business, and then do an exit? I think the problem is a lot of this is acting as if folks have that option. These businesses are draining them of money in a lot of instances. If you're paying on that lease, if you're trying to keep people employed, if you're trying to still manufacture or do things, there's costs involved. So the cash flow may not allow you even to have that option. This may be whatever exit ramp you see, it's time to go.
I think that's exactly right. And from a buying confidence side, while it might not be a good time to sell for all the aforementioned reasons, it's a good time to buy. And 57% of buyers, according to BizBuySell's small business confidence study, feel like they can buy now with a better value than last year. So, I think we are seeing that people are going to be opportunistic. And that kind of leads us into the second portion of our podcast today, which is why is it that startups are jumping in? Why are they picking now to jump in? Just like we could say business buyers are jumping in now, and we can see why that is.
Well, I think there's a bunch of reasons. I think the first and foremost, there's a lot of folks who have been laid off. And with benefits running out and, lifestyles being affected, What is the long-term plan? And for some of those, the long-term plan is, okay, I need to do something different. We're going to start a business, right? So some of this is pure economics, and what is the opportunity that I have? What is my choices? Okay. But I think some of it, which intrigues me even more, is just boredom. Like, you've been locked away, you're not going to work. Things are not normal here. You're bored. You have these ideas rattle around your head of what you would do with a business. And so you go ahead and you do it. You got this little side thing going, and then, it takes off, or you are enjoying yourself. One of the things that we read was that you see an uptick in startups whenever colleges are on college break, because all these college students come home and they are bored, so they start a little side business, right? I think we have a little bit of that going on here too. And then I think even bigger than that is there's a lot of capital right now. I mean, the whole CARES Act and all of this funding for small business that's out there, it was not intended to be used to start a startup boom. It was intended to help folks salvage their businesses during this crisis. But I think a lot of it is being actually sort of funneled towards either a brand new startup that's kind of grown out of a business that was sitting over here, or a complete restructuring of a business to where it's not even recognizable anymore. It's basically a brand new business. That, I think those are some of the reasons that this is happening.
Well, and I think another big one, Patrick, is disruption, right? I mean, we've seen, look at the companies that are killing it with any remote work solutions, for example.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of innovation on restaurant delivery services. And the fact of the matter is, startups are able to adapt more quickly. They're more nimble. They're not these big entities that are doing all this stuff. So if the ones that were existing that happen to be in a space that could capitalize it are killing it, and new ones are popping up. And those big obstacles of creating a marketing engine, a website, and all these things that used to be big barriers of entry don't exist anymore. You can put a website up in a day. We have tools now that make it so much easier for startups to happen.
And think about this too. We're living in a time where we have just proven that the cost structures around brick and mortar businesses are probably obsolete, right? We're all at home learning how to do this, not just e-commerce, but virtual business. Well, okay. Now that I've learned that, my startup doesn't scare me as much. I don't have to sign a lease. I'm not putting some number that I have to come up with on a monthly basis for the insurance on the building and the this and the that. I just sit in my office or my den and, subscribe to Zoom and go about opening up my business. That I think is going to be a permanent impact on some of how startups happen, right? Let's start up lean and mean for quite a while before we take on a whole lot of overhead.
Yeah. So I think that one of the things that's interesting about this is that you can read one type of article and it's very doom and gloom. We have less people, going into small business, and this is, a big engine of the economy. And then you read other articles about new businesses being formed, and that they can really help us grow out of the recession and bring businesses back. And certainly with more stimulus, obviously that would be helpful too. So what do you think in terms of the damage done to the economical ecosystem we've got going on here?
I think this is a catastrophic event. I think there's absolutely a silver lining in innovation. I think that this is going to allow for some very new startups and some things to happen, because that naturally comes out of any impact like this, right? Opportunity presents itself, people are going to take advantage. But the transfer of Main Street / middle class wealth to the top in this recession, this is a different kind of recession, and it's accelerating what we'd already seen. I mean, we have seen a movement where those who have the wealth were beginning to accumulate even more and more and more, right? But this has just put a rocket fuel on that. So from the standpoint of Main Street and the small business owner and middle class, this is not positive. There's no way you can try to make it that way. How we react to it and what opportunities it gives those who get innovative, there's a silver lining there, but I don't know that we know yet the full damage here. I mean, the possibilities of this second shutdown looming here as COVID spikes. I think there are a lot of businesses that aren't officially gone, that this makes them officially gone. And I also think when we hit time for this recovery, when we get back to whatever that normal looks like, I think a whole lot of folks don't even realize how much is going to have left, how many of these businesses are gone, what that looks like. And that makes me wonder, what does the employment, the United States employment look like, right? Where, if small business in Main Street is what employs that vast amount of folks at good real wages, is that, how quickly does that come back? Does that come back? What does that end up looking like? And I don't think we can sugarcoat this, but even without sugarcoating it, there are opportunities that this presents for those of us who get entrepreneurial and take advantage.
Well, I hope this was an informative deep dive looking at this issue today for those of you that are listening to Reigniting Small Business, the podcast today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.